Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the medical bay with practiced ease. The soft hum of medical equipment filled the air around her. She checked the vital signs of a young Vraxian child, his blue skin still pale from malnutrition. The child's mother stood nearby, her 6 arms clasped together in a gesture of gratitude. "He will be fine," Sarah said with a warm smile. "Another few days and he can go home." The UHMS Mercy's light was the pride of human medical achievement. The massive hospital ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers long. Its white hull gleamed under the light of distant stars. Red crosses marked every section of the ship. Everyone in the galaxy knew what those symbols meant. Help, safety, healing. Sarah had served on the Mercy's light for 7 years. She loved every moment of it. 3,000 crew members worked day and night to save lives. It didn't matter what species you were. It didn't matter which side of any war you fought on. If you were hurt, the Mercy's light would help you. Today, the ship carried 12,000 patients. Most were refugees from the border wars between the Vraxian hegemony and the Keltor clans. Families who had lost everything, soldiers from both sides who needed treatment, children who had never known peace. "Dr. Chen, we have incoming vessels," a voice crackled over the intercom. It was Lieutenant Morrison from the bridge. His voice sounded worried. Sarah tapped her communicator. "What kind of vessels?" "Caldrith Imperial Battle Group. 6 capital ships. They're not responding to our hails." A cold feeling settled in Sarah's stomach. The Caldrith Empire had been growing more aggressive lately. Their ships had been spotted in territories they had no business being in. But surely they wouldn't threaten a medical ship. That was against every galactic law. Against basic decency. "Keep broadcasting our medical codes," Sarah said. "They'll see we're non-combatant." She tried to sound confident. She walked toward the bridge. Other crew members passed her in the corridors. Some looked nervous. Others seemed unconcerned. The Mercy's light had never been attacked. Not once in its 100-year service history. Sarah reached the bridge. Captain Williams stood at the central console. His face was grim. On the main view screen, 6 massive ships hung in space. They were close. Too close. "Still no response to our hails," Morrison reported. "Their weapons are powering up." "That's not possible," Captain Williams said. "Broadcast again. All frequencies. Tell them we are a hospital ship under the Geneva Conventions and the Galactic Medical Neutrality Act." The communications officer nodded. Her hands moved quickly over her controls. "Broadcasting now, sir." Seconds passed, then minutes. The Caldrith ships moved into formation. Sarah recognized the pattern. It was an attack formation. "Captain," she said quietly, "we need to evacuate." "There are 12,000 patients on this ship, Doctor," Williams replied. "Most can't be moved. We have no weapons, no military value. They won't." The ship shuddered. Alarms blared throughout the Mercy's light. Sarah grabbed a console to steady herself. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. "Direct hit to the engine section," Morrison shouted. "We're dead in space." "Launch escape pods," Captain Williams ordered. "All hands, abandon ship." "Get the patients to the pods." Sarah ran. She sprinted back to the medical bay. Crew members rushed past her. Some carried patients. Others guided those who could walk. Children were crying. Adults were screaming. Chaos filled every corridor. She reached her station. The Vraxian child she had been treating was still in his bed. His mother was trying to lift him, but her arms were shaking too badly. "I've got him," Sarah said. She scooped the small child into her arms. "Follow me." Another explosion rocked the ship. Sarah fell. She managed to twist her body so the child wouldn't be crushed. Pain shot through her shoulder as she hit the floor. She forced herself up, kept moving. The escape pod bay was ahead. She could see other crew members, loading patients into the small craft. Hope flickered in her chest. They might make it. The first escape pod launched. Sarah watched it through the bay window. It moved away from the dying ship. Then a beam of purple energy lanced through space. The pod exploded in a ball of fire. "No," Sarah whispered. Another pod launched. Another beam. Another explosion. They were being hunted. The Caldrith were targeting the escape pods, deliberately. Sarah held the child closer. She looked around desperately. There had to be somewhere safe. Somewhere they could hide. "Medical Bay 7, someone shouted. It was Nurse Peters. "The deep core med bay. It has the best shielding." Sarah turned and ran with a group of others. They went down through service corridors and maintenance shafts. The ship shook constantly now. Fires burned in some sections. Bodies lay in others. Sarah tried not to look. She just kept moving. They reached Medbay 7. It was deep in the ship's center. The walls were thick, designed to protect sensitive equipment from radiation. About 50 people crammed inside. Crew members and patients, humans and aliens, all trying to survive. Sarah set the Vraxian child on a bed. She grabbed a medical scanner, checked him for injuries. He was scared, but unhurt. His mother held one of his small hands. "We'll be okay," Sarah lied. "Help is coming." The ship stopped shaking. The sounds of explosions faded. An eerie silence fell over everything. Sarah accessed a console. She tried to see what was happening outside. Most of the ship's systems were dead. But she found one external camera still working. The Caldrith ships were leaving, jumping to FTL. They had done what they came to do. Sarah looked at the people around her. 50 survivors. Maybe there were more in other sections. But the Mercy's light had carried 15,000 souls. Medical staff, patients, people who just wanted to help or be helped. Now most of them were gone. Sarah activated the emergency beacon. She poured every bit of power she could find into it. The message would take time to reach human space. Help wouldn't arrive for days, maybe weeks. She sat down on the floor. Her hands were shaking. The Vraxian child was crying softly. She pulled him close and held him. Tears ran down her face. "Help is coming," she whispered again, into the darkness. But she knew the truth. Humanity hadn't fielded a military fleet in over 200 years. What could they do against an empire? The lights flickered. The temperature was already dropping. They would have to ration power, water, everything. Sarah closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw the escape pods exploding, saw her friends and colleagues dying, saw children who would never grow up. Something changed in her heart at that moment. Something cold and hard settled where warmth had been. The Caldrith had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked healers. They had murdered children in hospital beds. They had done something that couldn't be forgiven. And somewhere far away in human space, a message was traveling through the stars. A message that contained video footage of everything that had happened. Everything the Caldrith had done. Sarah didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy was about to learn something about humanity. Something that had been forgotten for 2 centuries. You could push humans. You could challenge them. You could compete with them. But there was one line you didn't cross. One rule that couldn't be broken. Never attack those who heal. The message reached Earth 3 days later. It arrived in the middle of the night. Earth, Standard Time. An automated system received it first, then a junior communications officer, then his supervisor, then everyone who mattered. By morning, every human in the solar system knew what had happened. By afternoon, every being in the galaxy knew. The footage was clear. High definition. The Mercy's light broadcasting its medical codes. The Caldrith ships ignoring them. The first attack. The disabled engines. And then the worst part. The escape pods. One by one. Targeted. Destroyed. children visible through the windows in those final moments. President Catherine Okonkwo sat in the emergency session of the Unified Council. Around her, representatives from Mars, Luna, Titan, Europa, and 24 other human settlements waited in silence. The video had just finished playing. Again. They had all seen it a dozen times already. But each viewing made it worse. They murdered 15,000 people. The Mars representative said quietly. His name was David Kumar, and his voice shook. Medical personnel. Patients. They shot down escape pods. The Caldrith ambassador has issued a statement, someone reported. They claim the Mercy's light entered restricted space. They claim it was a legitimate military target. They claim we have no proof their ships were involved. Several council members laughed. It was a bitter, angry sound. We have perfect video footage, Catherine said. We have the ship IDs. We have voice recordings of their admiral giving the orders. They're not even trying to hide it. The question is what we do about it, the Luna representative said. Her name was Ming Chen. She was old enough to remember the last war. We haven't had a military fleet in 237 years. We have system defense platforms, patrol boats, nothing that could threaten the Caldrith Empire. Silence filled the chamber. Catherine looked at the faces around her. She saw anger, grief, frustration, but also something else. Something she hadn't seen in human eyes for a very long time. We mothballed the fleet, she said slowly. We didn't destroy it. Every head turned toward her. Ming Chen's eyes went wide. You can't be serious, Ming said. Those ships are ancient. The newest one is 200 years old. The crews are dead or retired. The supply chains don't exist anymore. We'd need years to reactivate them. How long would we need? Catherine asked. Realistically, I'll find out. Someone said. It was General Marcus Webb. He had been sitting quietly in the corner. He was 83 years old. He had served in the last active fleet before the mothballing. He was supposed to be retired. Webb left the chamber. He made calls, sent messages, accessed databases that hadn't been opened in decades. 2 hours later, he returned. 6 weeks, he said. We can have a functional battle fleet in 6 weeks. The council chamber erupted. People shouting questions, demanding explanations. Catherine held up her hand for silence. Explain, she said simply. Webb pulled up a holographic display. It showed Luna, Mars, the asteroid belt, dozens of locations across the solar system. We never scrapped the shipyards, Webb explained. We sealed them, put them in preservation mode. The fusion reactors were shut down, but not dismantled. The construction equipment was mothballed, but not destroyed. We have 78 Tangent-class dreadnoughts in storage, 300 Hammer-class battleships, thousands of smaller vessels. But the crews, Ming protested. We'd need hundreds of thousands of trained personnel. We have training AIs, Webb countered. The best ever developed. We can run accelerated training programs. Plus, there are more veterans than you'd think. People like me who served in the old fleet. We're old, but we remember. And the young people are already volunteering. I've had 50,000 applications in the last 3 hours. Catherine stood. She walked to the holographic display. She zoomed in on Luna. On a massive facility buried beneath the surface. The dry dock, where the first Tangent-class ships had been built. Show me, she said. They went there. Catherine, Webb, and a dozen others. They took a shuttle down to the lunar surface. Entered an access tunnel that hadn't been used in over 2 centuries. Descended into the depths. The lights came on as they entered. Automatic systems recognizing human presence. The dry dock stretched before them like a cathedral. And there, suspended in the center, was a ship, 12 kilometers long, 2 kilometers wide, armor plating that could shrug off nuclear weapons. Weapon systems that had been cutting-edge 2 centuries ago and were still deadly now. Point defense grids that could track and destroy millions of targets. Rail cannons that could crack planets. The UHS Retribution. The first Titangent-class dreadnought ever built. The flagship of humanity's last military fleet. My God, someone whispered. I forgot how big they are. Webb walked forward. His footsteps echoed in the massive space. He placed a hand on the ship's hull, closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Catherine saw tears. I was 25 years old when I served on her, Webb said quietly. We thought we'd never need her again. We thought we'd evolved past war. Can you bring her back? Catherine asked. Webb looked at her. In his eyes, she saw something terrible and wonderful. The look of an old soldier being called to duty one more time. Yes, he said. The vote happened that evening. Every human settlement had a representative. Every representative had watched the footage. The question was simple. Should humanity reactivate its military fleet? The vote was unanimous. Not a single voice of dissent. Catherine composed the message herself. She kept it short. 5 words. She sent it directly to the Caldrith Imperial Court, marked it urgent, made sure every other government in the galaxy received a copy. You attacked a medical ship. That was all. No threats. No demands. Just a statement of fact. The Caldrith response came quickly. Their ambassador laughed during his press conference. Called Humanity Weak. Said 200-year-old ships were no threat to a modern military power. Suggested humans should accept reality and pay reparations for entering Caldrith space. The galaxy watched humanity's response. Waited for the angry words. The diplomatic protests. The economic sanctions. Instead, lights began turning on across human space. On Luna, massive fusion reactors hummed to life for the first time in centuries. On Mars, automated factories started production lines. In the asteroid belt, mining operations shifted to military-grade materials, and in dry docks across the solar system, in facilities buried on moons and hidden in asteroid bases, the old ships woke up. Webb stood on the bridge of the Retribution. Engineers swarmed over every system, testing, repairing, updating. The ship had been built to last, and it had. Everything worked. Everything was ready. How long until we can launch? He asked his executive officer. 4 weeks, sir. Maybe 3 if we push it. Push it, Webb said. And send a message to all the other ships. I want a full battle group ready to deploy. 78 Titans. 300 hammers. Full support vessels. That's a lot of firepower, sir. Webb looked at the main view screen. It showed the footage from the Mercy's light. The escape pods exploding. He had watched it 100 times now. Each time, it hurt just as much. Good, he said coldly. It's supposed to be. Dr. Sarah Chen was still aboard the wreckage of the Mercy's light when she received the message. 3 days of darkness. 3 days of rationing, power, and water. 3 days of wondering if help would ever come. The message was from Admiral Webb himself. It said rescue ships were on their way. It said she and the other survivors would be brought home. And it said something else. Something that made Sarah's breath catch. We're coming for them. All of them. Justice is on its way. Sarah looked at the Vraxian child sleeping in her arms. She thought about all the people who had died. Her friends. Her colleagues. The patients she had sworn to protect. Justice, she whispered into the darkness. For the first time in 3 days, she smiled. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity's industrial might awakened. Intelligence agencies from every major power scrambled to understand what they were seeing. The numbers didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Ambassador Thelks of the Vraxian hegemony stood in his office staring at the reports. His species had fought 2 wars. With the Tholian Concordat, He understood military logistics. He understood what it took to build a warship. "This is impossible," he said to his military advisor. "They're saying humans have reactivated 78 capital ships in 4 weeks. That's not possible." "The shipyards were already built," his advisor explained. "The ships were already constructed. They just needed to be powered up and crewed. It's like they kept an entire military in storage. Why would anyone do that?" Thelks demanded. His advisor didn't have an answer. Neither did anyone else in the galaxy. It defied logic. Every other civilization recycled old military equipment, scrapped it for materials, used it for new projects. Only humans would spend resources maintaining ships they swore never to use again. The Kaldrith Empire issued official statements. They called humanity's actions warmongering. They said the reactivation of the fleet proved humans were the real aggressors. They claimed the Mercy's Light had been a spy ship all along, but privately, Kaldrith military commanders were worried. They looked at the intelligence reports, studied the human ship designs. Those designs were old, yes, but they were also advanced. In some ways more advanced than modern Kaldrith technology. Admiral Jathan himself reviewed the data. He was the one who had ordered the attack on the Mercy's Light. He felt no guilt about it. In his view, weakness deserved punishment. Humans had been weak. He had simply taught them a lesson. "Their ships are ancient," he told his staff officers. "Rail cannons? Kinetic weapons? We stopped using those centuries ago. Energy weapons are far superior." His chief tactical officer wasn't so sure. "Sir, kinetic weapons have advantages. They can't be dispersed by shields. They carry tremendous momentum. And these human rail cannons, the velocities they can achieve are remarkable." "Doesn't matter," Jathan waved him off. "We have 400 ships at Terminus Station. They have less than 300 in total. Numbers win wars." But even as he said it, Jathan felt a small seed of doubt. There was something in the way humans were preparing. Something methodical, patient, terrifying in its completeness. On Luna, Admiral Webb oversaw the final preparations. He walked through the Retribution's corridors with Dr. Sarah Chen beside him. She had been rescued 2 weeks ago. She should have been recovering. Instead, she had volunteered to join the fleet. "Why did you keep them?" Sarah asked. She meant the ships. All of them. You could have scraped them. Used the materials for colonies, stations, anything else. Webb was silent for a long moment. They reached an observation deck. Through the windows, they could see dozens of ships, Titans and Hammers and cruisers and destroyers. A fleet that hadn't sailed together in over 2 centuries. "Because we knew," Webb said finally. "We knew that someday, someone would push too far, would force our hand. We hoped it would never happen. We prayed it wouldn't, but we knew we had to be ready if it did." "That's a terrible burden," Sarah said quietly. "Yes," Webb agreed. "But someone had to carry it, so that people like you could heal, instead of fight, so that children could grow up without knowing war. We carried it gladly." He turned to look at her. His old eyes were sad, but determined. "They took that from us," he said. "They killed children in hospital beds. They murdered healers. They broke the one rule that civilizations are supposed to follow. Now we have to remind the galaxy why that rule exists." Sarah nodded. She understood. She had seen the hatred in Jathan's eyes in the recordings. The contempt. He had looked at the Mercy's Light and seen nothing but weakness to be destroyed. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Webb replied. "The first fleet launches at dawn." Across human space, similar scenes played out. Veterans reported for duty. Some were in their 80s and 90s. They had sworn they would never fight again. But they came anyway. Because someone had to. Because the young volunteers needed their experience. Training programs ran around the clock. The AIs that humanity had developed during the last war proved their worth. They could compress years of training into weeks, teach tactics and strategies directly to the human brain. It wasn't perfect. Real combat experience couldn't be replicated. But it was enough. The volunteers were different from the old veterans. They had grown up in peace. Many had never even held a weapon before. But they learned quickly. And they had something the old veterans had lost long ago. They had anger. Fresh, hot, burning anger at what had been done. Manufacturing plants worked without stopping. Ammunition. Spare parts. Supplies for 100 ships. The production rates shocked even the humans themselves. The automated factories their ancestors had built were masterpieces of efficiency. Sarah watched a factory on Mars through a video feed. She saw missiles being assembled. Each one carried enough explosive power to level a city. They rolled off the production line at a rate of 1 every 30 seconds. "How long can you maintain this production rate?" she asked the plant manager. "Indefinitely," the manager replied. These factories were designed to supply a war effort. They're barely working at 20% capacity right now. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This was just one factory. There were hundreds more across human space. The sheer industrial capacity was staggering. "No wonder you never scrapped them," she murmured. The Thalian Concordat reached out to humanity through diplomatic channels. They offered mediation, suggested a peaceful resolution, proposed reparations from the Caldrith Empire. President Okonkwo's response was polite but firm. "The Caldrith will answer for their crimes. There will be a reckoning. If they wish to avoid military action, they will surrender those responsible for trial. They have until our fleet reaches Terminus Station." The Caldrith response was predictable. They refused, called the demand an insult, mobilized their own fleets. The Ethereum Collective, mysterious and powerful, sent a single message. It was addressed to humanity as a whole. "We have watched your species for 200 years. We wondered if you had truly changed, or if the capacity for war still lived within you. Now we see. You have not changed. You have simply chosen restraint. That choice honors you. What you do next will define you." Webb read the message on the bridge of the Retribution. He thought about it for a long time. "We'll show them what defines us," he said to Sarah. "Not the capacity for violence, but what we do with it." The First Fleet gathered at the edge of the solar system. 237 ships of the line, Titans, and Hammers, and cruisers, support vessels, and medical ships, and supply craft. The largest human military fleet in over 2 centuries. Webb stood on the Retribution's bridge. His crew was ready. His ships were ready. The time had come. "All ships," he broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Webb. Tomorrow, we jump to Terminus Station. We go to deliver justice. Not revenge. Justice. We will follow the rules of engagement. We will offer surrender. We will not target civilians. We will not become what we fight against." He paused, looked at the faces of his bridge crew. The galaxy has forgotten what happens when you push humanity too far. When you break the rules that keep us civilized. Tomorrow, we remind them. For the Mercy's light, for every soul that died there. We sail at dawn. Across 237 ships, over 100,000 humans responded in unison. Their voices carried across communication channels. Unified. Determined. Unbreakable. For the Mercy's light. Sarah stood in the medical bay of the Retribution. She had insisted on serving aboard the flagship. Around her, medical staff prepared for casualties. They hoped there wouldn't be many, but they prepared anyway. That's what healers did. She thought about the Vraxian child. He was safe now. Back with his mother. Recovering on a human hospital station. He would grow up. Have a life. That's what this was all about. Protecting children like him. "Help is coming," she whispered. just like she had in the darkness of the dying Mercy's light. But this time, it wasn't a lie. This time, help had arrived. And it carried the weight of 200 years of human patience, finally exhausted. The old machines were awake. And they were angry. The human fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the terminus system. 237 ships appeared in perfect formation. The sudden arrival of so much mass caused sensor alarms to scream across every Kaldrith vessel in the system. Admiral Jothan was in a planning meeting when the alerts came. He rushed to the command center of Terminus Station. Through the windows, he could see them. Human ships, more than intelligence had predicted. And they were just sitting there, waiting. "Sir, incoming transmission," his communications officer reported. "Put it on screen," Jothan ordered. Admiral Webb's face appeared. He was old, Jothan noted, lined and worn, but his eyes were hard as diamonds. "Admiral Jothan," Webb said calmly, "I am Admiral Marcus Webb of the United Human Space Forces. You are charged with war crimes against the UHMS Mercy's Light. Surrender your fleet and yourself for trial. You have 1 hour." Jothan laughed. He couldn't help it. The arrogance of these humans. They had fewer ships than his defense force. Their technology was ancient, and they thought they could demand his surrender? "Human," Jothan replied. "You are in Kaldrith space. You will leave immediately or be destroyed. We have 400 warships to your 200. Your ancient vessels are no match for modern Kaldrith military power." Webb's expression didn't change. 59 minutes remaining. The transmission ended. Jothan stared at the blank screen. Around him, his officers waited for orders. "Battle stations," Jothan commanded. "All ships, form defensive formation around the station. Prepare to engage." The Kaldrith fleet moved. 400 ships against 237. The numbers favored them. Technology favored them. This would be over quickly. Across the system, observation platforms from neutral powers watched. The Vraxian hegemony had 3 platforms present. The Tholian Concordat had 2. Even the mysterious Ethereum Collective had positioned sensors to watch. The galaxy wanted to see what would happen when humans went to war. Aboard the Retribution, Admiral Webb watched the countdown timer. Beside him, Dr. Sarah Chen stood quietly. She had asked to be on the bridge. To witness this. He had allowed it. "They're not going to surrender," Sarah said softly. "No," Webb agreed. "They're not." "Then why give them the hour?" Webb turned to look at her. "Because we follow the rules. Even when others don't. Especially when others don't. That's what separates us from them." The timer reached 0. Webb took a deep breath. Let it out slowly. He had commanded ships in combat before. Long ago. But never like this. Never with this much at stake. "All ships," he broadcast. "Weapons free. Execute attack plan Alpha. Rules of engagement are in effect. Disable when possible. Destroy only when necessary. Protect civilian assets at all costs." The human fleet moved. It wasn't the dramatic charge Jothan expected. Instead, the ships spread out, moved into positions that seemed random, until suddenly, they weren't random at all. They had surrounded the Kaldrith fleet, cut off escape routes, created overlapping fields of fire. "All ships, fire at will," Jothan ordered. The Kaldrith fleet opened fire. Energy weapons blazed across space. Particle beams, and plasma cannons. The pride of Kaldrith military technology. The weapons were designed to overcome modern shield systems, to deliver massive amounts of energy directly to target hulls. The human ships didn't dodge, didn't weave. They just activated their shields and kept moving, and the Kaldrith weapons splashed harmlessly against those shields. The human defensive screens were old technology. But they had been designed during an era when energy weapons were the primary threat. They dispersed and redirected thermal energy with brutal efficiency. Impossible, Jathan breathed. Their shields shouldn't be that effective. Sir, they're returning fire. The human response was nothing like the Caldrith attack. No beams of light, no colorful displays of plasma. Instead, tiny objects launched from the human ships, missiles and projectiles. They seemed to move slowly at first. Then, they accelerated. And accelerated. And accelerated. The first rail cannon round hit a Caldrith cruiser at .4 light speed. The tungsten rod carried so much kinetic energy that the cruiser's shields might as well have not existed. The ship simply split in two. Reactor containment failed. The explosion took out two more ships nearby. Evasive maneuvers. Jathan screamed. All ships. Evasive maneuvers. But the human targeting systems were perfect. Inhumanly precise. Rounds that had been fired from thousands of kilometers away. Curved in flight. Adjusted trajectories. Compensated for evasive action. The Caldrith formation shattered as ships desperately tried to avoid the incoming fire. Sarah watched from the Retribution's bridge. She felt nothing. No satisfaction. No joy. Just a cold certainty that this needed to happen. These ships had murdered her friends. Had killed children. Now they were learning why you didn't do that to humans. Caldrith flagship is charging main weapons, a tactical officer reported. They're targeting something in the outer system. Webb's head snapped around. Show me. The screen zoomed in. A civilian station. Mining platform. Thousands of families lived there. And the Caldrith flagship was aiming its main cannon directly at it. He's going to kill civilians, Sarah whispered. If he's going down, he'll take them with him. Webb's mind raced. The Retribution was too far away. They couldn't intercept in time. But there was one ship that could. The destroyer, UHS Covenant. Captain Rachel Torres, commanding. Torres, Webb said into the comm. You're closest to that civilian station. I see it, sir, Torres replied. Her voice was steady. Calm. Moving to intercept. Rachel, Webb said quietly. Everyone on the bridge knew what he was really saying. What he was asking. You don't have to. My daughter died on the Mercy's light, sir, Torres replied. She was 7 years old. If I can save those families, then she didn't die for nothing. The Covenant was small compared to the Caldrith flagship. A destroyer against a battleship. But it was fast. It burned its engines at maximum power, raced across space, placed itself directly between the Caldrith flagship and the civilian station. Jathan saw the human ship moving, understood what it was doing. He smiled. One human destroyer for thousands of civilians? That was a trade he would take. He pressed the firing button. The Caldrith flagship's main cannon fired. A beam of concentrated energy that could crack a moon. It hit the Covenant dead center. The small ship's shields held for almost 2 seconds. Then, they failed. The destroyer vaporized instantly. 247 crew members died in a heartbeat. On the Retribution's bridge, silence fell. Sarah saw tears on Admiral Webb's face. Saw the way his hands clenched the armrests of his command chair. Saw something break inside the old man. New rules of engagement, Webb said quietly. His voice was ice. The Retribution moved. The massive Titangent-class dreadnought closed the distance to the Caldrith flagship. Jathan watched it come, realized his mistake. He had shown the humans he would kill civilians. Now they had no reason to show restraint. All power to shields, he ordered. Return fire. Everything we have. The Caldrith flagship fired every weapon. Dozens of energy cannons. Missile batteries. Point defense systems. Everything. The Retribution took it all. Its shields flared, brightened, held. And then the human dreadnought returned fire. 17 minutes. That's how long it took. Webb had timed it precisely. 17 minutes. The exact length of the attack on the Mercy's light. For 17 minutes, the Retribution methodically destroyed every system on the Kaldrith flagship: engines, weapons, shields, communications. Life support remained intact. Webb wanted them alive, wanted them to face justice. When it was done, the Kaldrith flagship hung in space. A broken shell. Powerless. Defenseless. Boarding parties. Webb ordered. Take Zathon alive. The rest of the battle lasted another 30 minutes. The Kaldrith fleet tried to fight, tried to flee, but the human ships were everywhere. Their targeting was too good. Their weapons, too effective. Ships that tried to run were disabled. Ships that tried to fight were destroyed. Ships that surrendered were taken intact. By the end, 378 Kaldrith ships had been captured. 22 had been destroyed. All 22 were ships that had fired on the Covenant, or ships that had tried to target the civilian station. The Kaldrith casualties: 4,200 dead. 180,000 captured. Human casualties: 247 dead. All from the Covenant. 91 wounded across the rest of the fleet. Sarah stood in the medical bay treating wounded Kaldrith prisoners. They looked at her with fear. Confusion. They didn't understand why the humans were healing them. Why they weren't being executed. Because we're not like you, Sarah said simply as she bandaged a young Kaldrith soldier's arm. We don't kill prisoners. We don't murder the helpless. That's what makes us different. Admiral Webb personally led the boarding party that captured Zathon. The Kaldrith admiral was found on his bridge, trying to activate the self-destruct. Webb stopped him, pulled him away from the controls. No, Webb said firmly. You don't get to take the easy way out. You're going to stand trial. You're going to face what you did. Zathon looked at the human admiral, saw the grief in his eyes, the controlled fury. What will you do to me? He asked. Webb's smile was cold. Give you justice. Real justice. The kind you denied the people on the Mercy's light. Across the galaxy, observers watched the footage in stunned silence. The battle had lasted less than 2 hours. The human victory had been absolute. Overwhelming. Precise. But what shocked them most wasn't the victory. It was how the humans had won. Every shot placed perfectly. Engines disabled. Weapons destroyed. But life support intact. Even in fury, even in grief, the humans had followed their rules of engagement. President Okonkwo broadcast a message to every civilization in the galaxy. Her face was solemn. Her words were measured. We did not want this. We will not continue it. But we will never forget it. The Kaldrith Empire attacked a medical ship, murdered 15,000 innocent souls. Today, justice was served. Let this be a lesson to all. Humanity seeks peace. But if you threaten those who heal, if you harm the innocent, you will face our wrath. And our wrath is terrible to behold. Lesson. The message ended. The galaxy was silent. In that silence, everyone understood. Humanity had changed the rules. The old balance was gone. A new one had begun. 3 months after the Battle of Terminus, the galaxy had changed. Every civilization had recalculated, rewritten their strategic assessments, adjusted their understanding of where humanity stood in the galactic order. The trial of Admiral Zathon took place on neutral ground, a space station maintained by the Vraxian hegemony. The judges came from 12 different species: humans, Vraxians, Thalians, and 9 others. Every major civilization sent representatives to watch. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the gallery. She had been asked to testify, to describe what had happened aboard the Mercy's light. She had done so calmly, clinically. Let the facts speak for themselves. Now she watched as Zathon stood before the court. The Caldrith admiral looked smaller somehow. Diminished. He had tried to maintain his dignity, his pride, but the weight of evidence crushed it. The prosecution presented video footage, audio recordings, testimony from survivors, testimony from Caldrith crew members who had been there, who had followed orders but now understood what those orders meant. Jathan's defense argued he had been following military protocol, that the Mercy's light had been in restricted space, that he had acted appropriately under Caldrith military law. The prosecution's response was simple. They showed footage of the escape pods, of children visible through the windows in those final moments. They let the images speak. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The verdict took the judges less than an hour to reach. Guilty on all counts. War crimes. Murder. Crimes against sapient life. The sentence was delivered by the chief judge, a Tholian named Kex Thor. His voice carried through the courtroom. Admiral Jathan, you are sentenced to life imprisonment. You will serve your sentence on a human penal colony. You will spend your remaining years in community service, helping to rebuild what you destroyed. You will live with what you have done, every day, for the rest of your life. Jathan expected execution, expected to be made an example. Instead, the humans were forcing him to live, to work, to atone. He looked at Sarah Chen sitting in the gallery, saw the quiet satisfaction in her eyes, understood that this was worse than death. The Caldrith Empire had fractured after Terminus. The military hardliners who had supported aggressive expansion lost power. Moderate factions took control. They came to the negotiating table with humanity, agreed to full reparations, withdrew from contested territories, surrendered every officer who had been involved in the attack on the Mercy's light. Emperor Cathrix himself issued a formal apology. It was broadcast across the galaxy. He stood before his people and admitted the attack had been wrong, criminal, against every principle of civilized conduct. We have learned a terrible lesson, the Emperor said. We thought humanity was weak. We were wrong. But more than that, we failed to see that strength and restraint are not opposites. Humanity showed us both. They defeated our fleet, but they also showed mercy to our soldiers, gave our officers fair trials. This is the mark of true civilization. The speech changed things. Other aggressive empires reconsidered their strategies. Border disputes that had simmered for decades were suddenly resolved through negotiation. Nobody wanted to be the next target of human anger. The Ethereum Collective, who had watched from the shadows for centuries, reached out to humanity with a formal diplomatic overture. Ambassador Thelx of the Vraxian hegemony found himself mediating talks between humans and the enigmatic collective. Why now? President Okonkwo asked during the first meeting. You've watched us for 200 years. What changed? The Ethereum representative was a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix. Its voice resonated directly in the minds of those present. You proved something we needed to see, the collective said. Many species can wage war. Many can show mercy. Few can do both simultaneously. You did not become monsters to defeat monsters. This is rare, valuable. We wish to know you better. Trade agreements followed. Technology exchanges. Cultural programs. The galaxy was reorganizing itself around a new reality. Humanity wasn't just another civilization anymore. They were a major power, one that needed to be respected, listened to, never provoked. But the changes to humanity itself were just as profound. Admiral Webb stood on Luna, watching the decommissioning ceremony for the First Fleet. Not all the ships were being mothballed again. Half would remain active, a permanent deterrent. A reminder, we can't go back, President Okonkwo said quietly. She stood beside Webb, watching the ships. Can we? Can we? No, Webb agreed. The innocence is gone. We know now that peace requires strength, that good intentions aren't enough. Someone always pushes, always tests. We have to be ready. But we won't become a military empire, Okonkwo said firmly. That's not who we are. Reward. Webb smiled. It was tired, but genuine. No. We'll be something new. Something the galaxy hasn't seen before. Healers who can fight. Warriors who choose peace. Strong enough to defend. Wise enough to restrain. The T-Tangent-class ships that remained active were converted for dual purposes. They retained their weapons, but half their space was converted to medical facilities. Humanitarian aid storage. Disaster relief equipment. They became symbols of humanity's new identity. Ready to help, ready to defend, never to aggress. Sarah Chen was asked to lead the construction of a new ship. The Mercy's Light, too. It would be the first of a new class. Hospital ships like before. But these would have shields, point defense, and a permanent escort of human warships. We won't be helpless again, Sarah said at the keel-laying ceremony. We'll still heal. Still help. But we'll be able to protect ourselves. Protect our patients. That's not aggression. It's common sense. The new Mercy's Light was larger than the original. More capable. It could treat 50,000 patients simultaneously. Had research labs for developing new medicines. Training facilities for medical personnel from any species. But it also had armor, shield generators, point defense grids, and a squadron of human destroyers assigned as permanent escort. The message was clear. Come for healing, and you're safe. Come for violence, and you'll regret it. Admiral Webb retired for the second time. This time, it stuck. He was 84 years old. He had done his duty. Led humanity through its darkest moment in 2 centuries. Now he could rest. His replacement was Admiral Maria Torres, wife of Captain Rachel Torres, the woman whose husband had died aboard the Covenant. She stood on the bridge of the Retribution and accepted command of humanity's active defense fleet. My husband gave his life to protect civilians, she said during her acceptance speech. That's what we do. That's who we are. We protect. We defend. But we do not conquer. We do not oppress. Any who doubt this will learn the same lesson the Caldrith learned. On Luna, a memorial was built. The wreckage of the original Mercy's Light was recovered, brought home, reconstructed as a monument. An eternal flame burned at its center. 15,000 names surrounded it. Every crew member, every patient, every soul that had died. Sarah Chen attended the dedication. She stood before the memorial with tears streaming down her face. The Vraxian child she had held in the darkness was there too. He was healthy now. Growing. His mother stood beside him. Thank you, the mother said in halting English. You save my son. You save all of us. Sarah knelt down to the child's level. We couldn't save everyone, but we made sure what happened to them mattered. That their deaths changed things. The child reached out, placed a small hand on Sarah's cheek. They heroes, he said simply. Like you. Like you. Like you. Sarah shook her head. I'm not a hero. I'm just a doctor. Who survived? No, Admiral Webb's voice came from behind her. He had come to the dedication despite his retirement. You're the one who reminded us why we fight. Not for revenge. Not for glory. But to protect people like this child. That's worth fighting for. Across the galaxy, humanity's influence grew. Not through conquest. Not through intimidation. But through example. Human medical ships traveled to disaster zones. Human engineers helped build infrastructure on developing worlds. Human diplomats mediated conflicts. And behind it all, the Titan fleet watched. Ready. Waiting. Hoping never to be needed, but always prepared. The Caldrith Empire learned to coexist with its neighbors. The hardliners were gone. New leadership focused on trade. Cooperation. They would never forget Terminus. But they learned from it. Other civilizations that had considered aggressive expansion reconsidered. The math was simple. Attacking humans meant facing the Titan fleet, and nobody wanted that. Better to trade, to talk, to build relationships. President Okonkwo stood in the Unified Council chambers 5 years after the attack on the Mercy's Light. She was older now, tired, ready to let someone else lead. But before she left office, she wanted to say something. "We didn't want to become a military power," she said to the assembled representatives. "We wanted to be healers, explorers, artists, scientists, and we still are. But we're also protectors now. Guardians. We've accepted that burden. Not with joy, but with determination." She pulled up an image. The new Mercy's Light 2. It hung in orbit above a war-torn world, treating refugees, saving lives, defended by human warships. "This is who we are now," Okonkwo continued. "We heal with one hand, defend with the other. We offer friendship to all. But we will never again be easy targets. Never again will someone attack our healers and face no consequences." The Council voted to commission 237 new medical ships, one for each year humanity had slept, one for each ship that had sailed to Terminus. They would be named after the crew members who had died aboard the original Mercy's Light. Sarah Chen was asked to christen the first one. She stood at the ceremony with a bottle of champagne. The ship was beautiful, gleaming white with red crosses, but unlike its namesake, it bristled with defensive systems. It would never be helpless. "I name this ship Sarah's Promise," she said, smashing the bottle against the hull. "We promise to heal, to help, to serve, and we promise that those who attack healers will face justice." The ship launched, began its mission. Behind it, human warships followed. Silent, watchful, ready. Admiral Webb watched from his retirement home on Mars. He was 90 years old now. His time was short, but he had lived to see humanity find its balance. Neither purely peaceful, nor purely military. Something in between. Something better. "We did it," he said to the empty room. To the ghosts of those who had died. To Captain Torres and the crew of the Covenant. To the 15,000 souls of the Mercy's Light. "We made it mean something. We didn't let your deaths be in vain." In the darkness of space, the Titan fleet maintained its watch. The ships that had been built for humanity's last war now served to prevent the next one. They hung in orbit. Silent giants, sleeping lightly. And across the galaxy, in medical bays and relief stations and disaster zones, humans worked alongside aliens of dozens of species. Healing, helping, building. The banner they flew was simple. A white field, with a red cross, and a single line of text in 100 languages. "We heal. We remember. We endure." The old Terran Titans had woken once. Reminded the galaxy of what humanity could do when pushed too far. Now, they watched. Waited. Hoped never to wake fully again. But they would, if they had to. The galaxy knew that now. Everyone knew it. And in that knowledge, there was peace. Not the innocent peace of before, but something harder, stronger, built on respect and understanding rather than ignorance. Sarah Chen looked up at the stars from her office aboard the Mercy's Light 2. Somewhere out there, the Vraxian child she had saved was growing up, having a life. That's what mattered. That's what all of this had been for. "We're healers," she whispered to the darkness. "But we're not helpless." And in the silence of space, the old Titans stood guard, ready, waiting, eternal.